we have 4 types of mixers slash mullers. We refer to our equipment as mulling. DISA has mixers, okay? So we want to make sure that you could have 3 different choices or 4 different choices for the same application. What does your customer need? Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
to so today, how I structured the training, it's going to be less technical. We're going to get into some of the technical, but we're going to get more of like how can we make the communication better between our companies? Okay. So
Okay.
so it can be smoother and much more efficient up front. This way, with the dialogue of it, when we're dealing with 12-hour time difference, every question you have is a wasted day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
don't want to waste anybody's time. So the more efficient in communication, the quicker we can be responsive to the customer.
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer is sometimes you don't have to be right, you have to be first. And it
Yeah.
can be delayed. Here at Simpson in Chicago, we are the global tech center for Simpson for all of NORCAN. So what that means is we get all the questions from around the world here.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Tom and I conducted an agent training for our agents in Europe back in November, and it was a 4-day training session. We
Mhm.
can't cover everything we covered there in an hour time. Okay. So what
Okay.
I would propose is maybe twice a month, at least once a month, talk about a specific piece of equipment that maybe your market has more interest in than our market. Okay. And we
Yeah.
can focus on that equipment, train. You guys can go and try to field some questions in selling and come back with more questions. And then we can do another set or series of equipment. So it's going to be kind of a process
Yeah.
versus I call it show up and throw up. Here we have everything now. Now go sell. And we don't do a good job or a thorough enough job on selling and teaching and training. And this way you can go in market, see what mixers are there, what price points are there, who are we competing with, and then go from, and then how can we be more practical and ultimately successful in sales. So an interesting thing here is everything right now for Simpson, for the most part, either is manufactured in the United States or manufactured in the Czech Republic. Okay.
Okay.
So right now we're in the midst of, it's going to be take a couple years, but we're transferring a lot of our technology and the production of our technology to India and China. We wish it could happen overnight. It can't, but we're starting slowly but surely. And the first 2 pieces of equipment, or the 3 series of equipment we're starting to, is sand testing equipment. Some of those pieces of equipment we're transferring to China are multi-coolers, which is one of the most important pieces of equipment that we sell and our most global product line we have. And that would be conditioning the sand. And then our Proclaimer sand reclamation is another piece of equipment that we're tech transferring first. And then we'll start transferring our mixers and mullers. So
Okay.
that's how we structured it. We're going to familiarize yourselves with our website. Our website is not a marketing tool. Yes, that's part of it, but it's a truly an educational tool and it's a tool to help our communication. So I'm going to help you navigate our website a little bit because that's only going to help the communication that we have too. So am I
Mhm.
meeting everybody's expectations? I hope so. Please, this is not a teacher talking to his students, okay? This
Yeah.
is an
Okay.
interactive. Stop. I talk fast. If I'm talking too fast, tell me to slow down. I just want to make sure that we start on the right foot and we all understand each other's objectives.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, let me share my screen and we can start with the presentation. Let me know when you see it and we can go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah.
Okay,
I can
good.
see it.
Okay. So basically, Simpson at a glance, like I said, this is going to be a very brief overview. And then when we start doing more of these, we can get into each one of the pieces of equipment.
Yeah.
So I did a presentation recently, and if anybody has any questions, I can't see anybody because now I'm presenting. So somebody just let me know or just say, Andy, stop. So I started the
Okay.
presentation to all of the sales managers in the United States for all of NORCAN pieces of equipment. But why buy Simpson? Not only why should our customers buy Simpson, but why did NORCAN purchase Simpson almost 2 years ago?
Okay.
Well, the first thing is let's understand just the foundry market globally. So, and this is through the eyes of an American, so I'm sure I got it wrong in a lot of other different parts of the world. So bear with me with some of the data. This is just the data that we have. So there's
Mm-hmm.
3,000 foundries in North America, about 6,000 foundries in Europe or our European region, 5,000 in EMEA, and 30,000 in basically Southeast Asia, including China, Korea, and Japan, etc. So
Okay.
that's basically how we view this, just the number of potential customers that we have.
Yeah.
So the next thing is, what is our market penetration? So in North America, we have 2,100 pieces of equipment in those 3,000 foundries. So we have a really nice market penetration. We have
Mm.
2,300 pieces of sand testing equipment in North America.
Mm.
Now in Europe, we have only 300 pieces of equipment and 1,500 pieces of sand testing equipment.
Mm-hmm.
In EMEA, only 80 pieces of equipment and 250 pieces of sand testing equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And then in, quite frankly, Southeast Asia, 100 pieces of equipment and 800 pieces of sand testing equipment. So you can see our market penetration falls off quickly. And then in truly Southeast, you can see the lack of penetration. We sold our first mix muller to a pigment company, Cathay, in Malaysia this year. Okay, so that's a
Okay.
mix muller. And then we have 300 pieces of sand testing equipment truly in your market. So you see the penetration, despite having previous agents, isn't as much as we'd like. So basically, Norcan purchased us for growth. In North America, we have about greater than a 90% market share for sand preparation equipment and for sand testing equipment. In the
Yeah.
rest of the world, we have less than a 5% market share. So Norcan acquired Simpson to grow this piece of the pie, the rest of the world. So
Okay.
that's one of the reasons why we're speaking today is we want growth, we need growth, and we need to grow the Simpson market share in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So that's why we're here today. So how does Simpson fit into the Norcan family? You know, Simpson has their sand preparation. Simpson also has sand reclamation. And in this, we have sand testing, but that's more in process. We don't have the laboratory. But this is basically how Simpson fits into the entire process. We complement and quite frankly, we complete the entire Norcan family
Yeah.
from both a ferrous and a non-ferrous standpoint. A good example of this is a kind of like a mini aluminum foundry. I know we have the ferrous guys online. I'm not sure if the non-ferrous joined us, but we have the completely connected aluminum foundry. So you can see the green pieces of equipment in a typical sand or molding operation. So up here in the right-hand side, this is a 100B speed muller with a Hartley. We have sand reclamation that's way back in here underneath all the sand towers. We've got the multi-cooler here that's preparing the sand, cooling the sand, adding moisture, making more of a homogeneous sand system. But you see how it flows within the DISA sand plant and molding line, the Wheelabrator shot blast machine, the IPG and the Strico stack ovens and the IPG high pressure die casting. So we're all kind of interconnected. And that's another reason why Norcan acquired Simpson is we complete the family, almost a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
So you need to understand a little bit about Simpson. We're very proud of our legacy. We're fifth generation. We were fifth generation owner before we sold to Norcan. And you can see that from Peter Simpson, when he came over from Scotland in the early 1900s, to currently Bruce, who is still our president and CEO of all Norcan North America, who's involved on a daily basis. He's my boss. And so we're still part of the family heritage, and family is still here. So we go back generations, and again, extremely proud. A lot of technology that was developed specifically in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that are still vibrant today. So the Simpson legacy, prior to Bruce coming on board, you can see basically all the inventions that have happened. You know, whether it was the first fast brick. So initially, these our mix mullers were used to make basically potting compound for bricks. And then Peter Simpson created Simpson USA. The first new mix muller was created in 1914. In fact, we get inquiries today for spare parts. The, from 1951, people are still using mix mullers from 1951. And then sand reclamation started in the early 50s. Then sand preparation or multi-cooling started happening in basically mid to late 50s. And then finally came, multi-mull, and then the multi-cooler in the 60s. So today we're still utilizing technology that was developed over 6 decades ago, and it's still applicable today. When Bruce took over, we grew through acquisition. So in 1995, we purchased the Dietert automation from George Fisher. B&P stands for Beardsley and Piper in 1998. That's where our speed muller technology came from. Herosa is the unique sand testing equipment that we still have a relationship with them today. They're actually manufacture all the sand testing equipment out of Argentina.
Yeah.
Hartley Corporation, that's our in-process sand testing compactability. And then 2008 comes full circle. We acquired the sand testing equipment from George Fisher, actually from DISA. And last but certainly not least, in 2018, we purchased Weibach out of basically near Dusseldorf, Germany. And today they manufacture most of our larger OEM equipment for the Southeast Asia market. So we can kind of, until India and China are set up for manufacturing, we've been utilizing, because they manufacture everything in metric, where the United States still manufactures everything in imperial. So we utilize Weibach for our manufacturing out for Southeast and Northeast Asia. And we do all of our manufacturing and assembling out of the Czech Republic. So this kind of gives you a historical perspective that we're not a new company. We've been a company that's been around for a while, that's been successful for generations, and then ultimately grew through acquisitions. So this is a little brand video. I'm not sure if you can hear it or not. Can you hear it, Tom, or no?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear.
So this is actually real footage from some of our customers. This is Sand Cooler. This is actually a company by the name of Donsko. This is our this was a speed muller. This is the Hartley, the in-process testing for green sand. So there's questions. This is sand testing equipment. Sand reclamation for our Proclaim, one of the simplest machines that there are. Obviously, we pride ourselves in service and support. Those are our control cabinets. This is briefly who SIMPSON is and the different pieces of equipment, how they're interrelated into the foundry. So now this brings us to the website, okay? And I told you
Okay.
we're going to spend a little time on this to make sure we can navigate and you guys familiarize yourselves with the website. So I'm going to leave here. And there's two different ways to get to the main website, either through NORCAN Group or through the SIMPSON Group itself, and then order the equipment. This presentation can be shared, so I'll make a couple changes and I'll provide it to you so you can use this for kind of a ready reference. So if
Thank
you
you.
just would click on this, so this is the main NORCAN web page. I'm assuming I'm still sharing my screen, okay? So on the NORCAN web page, you just go to the NORCAN group, this is one way, and you can choose SIMPSON, or you can page down and choose SIMPSON from here to navigate to the SIMPSON website. So if I just
Okay.
basically click on here, excuse me, SIMPSON, we'll go to the SIMPSON main page. Now I'm telling you right now, and I can't stress it enough, this is going to be your greatest friend because it's going to help you answer a lot of the questions you have before we even awake in the morning with those 12 hours difference. And right
Yeah.
here is where it all starts at the main navigation page. Okay. So you go and just put your cursor over equipment, and you're going to spend a lot of time in these three groups: sand preparation, sand testing, and sand reclamation. So if you go to sand preparation in itself, you have all these different choices, and these are the things that we'd recommend of all the equipment for sand, preparing the sand before it goes into the molding machine. So you have your choices for your online Hartley control system. We'll talk about dosing when we get into the specific equipment. Then you have the SIMPSON speed muller, the multi-cooler, the mix muller, the multi-mull, and then we also do have some engineering solutions, some other ancillary equipment. So if you go into why it's important to start here is you just go into the Hartley online control system. A lot of the beginning pages are going to look like this. It kind of goes through the explanation, what it is, kind of gives you the variety of choices. And this is why we ask so many questions, is because you have three different choices. If it's a foundry that isn't very sophisticated, but they do want an inline compactability tester, you'd use the L1. If you have a foundry that we sell, we don't sell a lot of these. If you have a foundry that's a green sand foundry that wants an inline compactability controller and also screen strength and a couple other tests, you get the B1. But if you have a continuous muller, which we have one of the only continuous mullers that are out there, makes the most amount of sand with the least amount of energy, then you require a C1. How do we identify this? Is we're always going to ask you for this sheet. This project information sheet is going to be the first thing we're going to ask. And almost a lot of our conversations is and just to use Vincent for an example, he goes, can you send me a quote on a Hartley? Most companies would say yes. But as you see, we have three different choices of Hartleys we can choose from. So what we do is we'll send you a link to the page and say, can you fill this out? Now, I'm a salesperson at heart. Every salesperson hates filling these out. I'm telling you right now. However, they're so important because yes, it gives us the contact information, but it lets us know a little bit more about what kind of metal are you pouring? How many molding machines do they have in their size? The existing molding machines, if there are equipment, we can tie into these Hartleys, into Irix, into Savellis, into, Fondark, into other people's mixers. We can hook up these Hartleys to other mixers, but we have to know what we're hooking up into. Do they desire some of these optional equipment? And when we go through the equipment, it'll make more sense. And additional communication, what kind of SCADA systems, other PLCs, data tags, they want to know temperature. They want to know weight that's going into their mixer. There's other things that they want to know because the Hartley, quite frankly, controls the sand system. We refer to our mixers as being dumb machines. They just mix. The Hartley tells them what to mix. That's why this information is important.
And
I like to use the term garbage in, garbage out. Without good information here, we're not going to give you the best recommendation, which will lead to either wrong equipment, more expensive equipment. So that's why we're going to ask you to fill out these to the best of your ability.
And the other thing that this adds is if it's a new customer, right? So if we have a customer that's not in our system and we get this piece of information, now all of a sudden we have a customer name, we have a contact, we have an address, we have a website, then we can load that into our D365 system, and we have records of this. And that's where we would track serial numbers too for every customer. We know what serial numbers of our equipment that they have on their on site, which when it comes to I need spare parts or I need an upgrade on this piece of equipment, if we have those records, it makes things that much smoother.
And any questions on this?
Key.
This is, when you start dealing with DISA, and I'm sure Wheelabrator, they have something called loading studies, okay? And those loading studies is where all their calculations start. This is one of our loading studies that we have. So, again, how to navigate. It's always on the beginning page, this project information sheet. As much information as you have, remember, garbage in, garbage out, that you can get from your customer. The ease of communication between us is going to happen. And the efficiency of communication between us is going to happen.
Okay.
So then you come over here, Hartley dosing, bond feed system dosing. Then you have the speed muller. Again, very similar project information sheet. It's the exact same one. But down here also comes into more marketing. This is the marketing side. But then you have different brochures. Okay. At NORCAN, we don't believe in printed brochures, just an FYI. So we're not supposed to be printing. We're sustainable, saving the environment. So you come over here and you go hit the metric. And here's basically the full brochure on all of our sand preparation equipment. Kind of breaks down the difference between mulling and mixing. Each green piece of equipment is something that Simpson can provide and sell. Typically, we don't provide the cyclones. Typically, we don't provide the bucket elevators because locally they're much more cheaper and expensive. But the bond feed, the multi-cooler, the muller itself. But as I'm saying is that we have 3 different choices of mullers, plus we have the DISA turbine mixers too that we're going to be taking over. So we have 4 choices. We want to try to find the right product to fit your customer's needs. The Simpson multi-cooler, which we'll talk about a little bit. This is truly a global, but you can see the sizes. And typically, our engineering team hates this, the naming convention, the 150, 200, 250, 300, 100, that corresponds almost to the tons per hour. Okay. Now, this is imperial tons. As you can see, the metric tons per hour here varies a little bit slower. So you ask your customer, how many tons per hour of sand do you go through? That's one data point. If they say 90 tons of sand or 80 tons of sand? Well, Andy, I need a quote on MC 100. Well, as we started the conversation, in Malaysia, Indonesia, you're much more humid. So the ambient humidity plays a part of it. The ambient air temperature, the sand temperature, the desired sand temperature out, the desired moisture out. So all that data needs to be captured so we size it appropriately. There's nothing worse for a foundry for a multi-cooler that's too big or too small. Both of them lead to issues with cost and inefficiencies. Then you start talking about the difference in the mixed mullers or batch mulling, which just like is batches. So you have the different variety of sizes here. And then you have the speed muller. You're like, Andy, Tom, how do I know which one to choose? Because we've got 1,130 kilograms for a 2G, and we have 1,580 for an 85B. Well, how do we know which one to choose? That's when we start asking questions. What type of foundry? What do they pour? What is their desired cycle time for their batches? What's the condition? We recently have started selling more speed mullers because they have larger batches of sand in lower amounts of time, but they use more energy. Mixed mullers use very little kilowatts to produce really good sand. Now you compare this to an IRIC turbine mixer or even a decent turbine mixer, and this is a tenth of what they typically use, 30% of what they typically use. And then comes down to a multi-mull. Nobody else has a multi-mull. And typically people say, well, these are only for huge foundries, Andy. Tom can attest to the fact that, John Deere had two?
We had, well, at one time we had three running.
3 26Gs or 26Gs, right?
We had two 26G 350s and one 26G 500, which is the biggest one.
So they're producing 10,200 kilos per batch on that, and then multiply that by 2, so 15. So if all three of them are running, you're basically producing 25,000 kilos per hour of sand. Okay. So that's how big the John Deere foundry was. But then you come down to this 215G, 1,130 kilos per hour. Well, doesn't that look similar to the 2G? And doesn't that look kind of similar to the 85B? How do I know which one to choose, Andy and Tom? So we would recommend a 215G for a non-ferrous foundry that produces similar castings all day long. These continuous machines are designed to run constantly. They do not like to stop and start and stop and start. But we'll get into that when we talk about the individual pieces of equipment. But again, this is a sizing chart. So and then we get into the proclaim and then the sand testing equipment itself. So this is all located, one more time, on either the speed muller, the sand preparation brochure, etc. like that. Also, too, we have great tutorials and videos on the website as well. How does a speed muller work? And so basically, where does it fit into the overall foundry? You can see the speed muller underneath the sand return.
You could probably mute it, Andy.
Mute it? Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty loud.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
No,
Yep. This is an older video. We have a newer video that's out there that kind of goes through what the process is and the overall, whether it's the sand, etc. We have another video that I can show you in a little bit that'll come up. But again, so you have a tutorial video to kind of educate. You have the wheels that are spinning horizontally versus a mixed muller. The wheels spin vertically. and it presses the sand against the walls. We'll talk about that when we get into the specific example. But again, that's why you have videos, you have photo galleries, and then you have different related content here. But again, what size do you need? The conversation starts with a sand testing brochure, get the sizing charts, but most importantly, I can't stress enough the project information sheet. Because I'm telling you, 9 times out of 10, we're going to ask you, did you fill it out? Just FYI.
Yeah, about the only
Okay.
time we wouldn't ask for that is if we're doing a direct replacement of an existing piece of equipment. That the customer says, I haven't added any capacity in my foundry. I have a 100B 200. I want to replace my 100B 200. That'd be about the only time we would not ask for that worksheet. But I would always start with it. It's the easiest way to go. Plus, it just gives all of us visibility of what their molding equipment is capable of. And when we can always just verify that 100B is the right piece of equipment, for example.
So then the multi-cooler, again, to quote 3 of the people I respect probably most on the green sand side of the business that I've met, Tom being one of them, if there's a single piece of equipment, OEM equipment that you purchase from Simpson, it would be the Simpson multi-cooler. And this is to get the foundry sand prepared as homogeneously or as best it can possibly be to produce the best castings with the least amount of effort. And I'm telling you, sometimes we can get by with the sand not necessarily having it filled out, but another project information sheet, this is a showstopper. Without this filled out, we won't quote a multi-cooler. We need to have this information. A lot of times the foundries will say, I don't know. We can help the conversation, but we need to truly, the address is extremely important. That's one of the key components of we actually have a mathematical formula that we send all this data through to tell you what is the optimal size for the foundry for the worst conditions. Now, we always utilize the worst conditions. Then we back into how often do they experience the worst conditions? Is it 90% of the time? Is it 5% of the time? And then we can size it appropriately. Like I mentioned before, I know most of you don't deal with a ton of high elevation. I don't believe in your geography, but elevation has a significant impact just for the amount of air that's available. The ambient temperature and humidity is extremely important. The incoming sand temperature. If they don't know, I'm sure you guys have IR heat guns. You can just shoot the sand going into the molding machine or going into the sand preparation equipment, and you can see exactly what's going in beforehand and what's coming out of it. But this information, I can't stress enough, we won't quote it without it. I'm just telling you right now. We just won't.
Okay.
And then again, some other just kind of data and training. The other, which I know you guys are getting a lot of inquiries about, the sand testing equipment, okay? This is where the website is going to be your best friend and then some. And the reason why I'm saying is that what product do we recommend? What product do you need? What do we do? Here's a complete listing of all the sand testing equipment that we offer. Over 70 pieces of sand testing equipment that we have. So then you're saying, okay, great, I appreciate that. But I'm going into a customer, they're a Furan foundry. How do I know what equipment do they need? Well, you visit here and you say, oh, it's a no-bake air set foundry. This is an example of a very well-equipped sand lab, all the pieces of equipment that they would need to run a really good no-bake foundry. Or same thing with clay bonded basic. It's a small foundry. They don't have a lot of capital to invest and spend. These are examples of what they should have at a minimum for a basic foundry. And then you have the advanced, which is, again, advanced, significantly more for green sand. Now, when we get more of the technical training, I know Tom will say first and foremost, the sand lab should be managing your foundry, not the Hartley or the sand preparation tester online. They should validate it, but this is what should be running. And all the foundries should have a well-equipped laboratory. Then you're saying, Andy, okay, great. They have a piece of equipment, but they lost the manual. All of our manuals are on here in variety of languages that are listed. So you can always go on for your customers and say, you know what? I lost the manual for the per meter. You don't need to call us. You can just go online or send them the link, your customer, the link to the manual. That's why I say this is going to be your best friend, because these are all the questions that have come up for sand testing. And last but certainly not least, you know, Andy, how do I set up my universal strength machine? Customer has it. We don't have a service guy that's ready, available to come on out. How are they going to set it up properly? Well, would you look at this? We have now videos of our most common pieces of equipment and how to set up the equipment in their lab, and going through step-by-step instructions on how to take it out of the box. What does it look like? Where should we set it? How many people need to lift it? For all of our more common pieces of equipment that are a little bit more difficult to set up. How it works. So you can see all these how-to videos that are set up for some of our more common pieces of equipment or more involved pieces of equipment. So examples of labs, all products. And then last but certainly not least, I said the three pieces: sand reclamation. This is, again, a different worksheet that needs to be filled out, because it kind of fine tunes what people are trying to do. Is it a green sand? Are they going from green sand to green sand, which quite frankly, we have a ton of experience? Are they going from chemically bonded sand? Some chemically bonded sands are much easier to reclaim using the SIMPSON equipment versus others. We'll talk about this. This is not a thermal unit. This is a pneumatic. Not necessarily mechanical, but it's a pneumatic reclamation. We'll talk about the difference in there. But this is where, again, we cannot do what we need to do unless this is filled out. And then we'll get into the benefits, how it works, and we'll show a video in a little bit on how it works. But all of this, again, we're going through a lot of things right now. How do we do it? Where do we do it? All this is on our website. And the toughest thing for sand reclamation, being in Southeast Asia, we always recommend is testing the material before you make a decision. Because we like to know how efficient our sand reclamation will be on their specific sand. We have 2 testing facilities. One in Atlanta, US, and one in Denmark. Both are not operational right now, but in the next 6 to 8 weeks, because we just moved our lab and our sand testing facility from Chicago down to Atlanta. So we're updating the lab down there, and we're installing the sand reclamation unit. And DISA has a new pilot foundry that they are installing their sand reclamation unit to run testing. Way in the future, we plan on having one in Southeast Asia someplace, but it's still too early. We have to be manufacturing the equipment over there before we actually have a testing facility.
Okay.
So again, this is a quick tutorial on Simpson's website. This is going to be your friend, I'm telling you. I can't stress that enough. Any questions? Okay. And again, these will be links that you can click to in the presentation, and we can go from there. Okay, so as I was mentioning, you can see this was like one of the original intensive mixers. It was only one wheel at the time, and I see how we've evolved from whether it's the speed muller. This is a mix muller, which was predates the speed muller. This is the multi-cooler, and then that's sand reclamation. So we precondition with a multi-cooler. We can control the sand after we prepare it. We can reclaim the sand and then the sand laboratory. And this is how we basically go through our presentation. So to start out from the technical perspective overview, we're not going to get too detailed. The Simpson multi-cooler, okay? It's all about getting the best sand into the muller and ultimately into the molding machine. How are you going to do it? You need to precondition the sand. Now, I'll tell you, there's a lot of people that have tried to duplicate Kunkel Wagner, Savelli. There's a couple of them in even IRIC has one. And you take a look at it, it looks similar, but they use a lot thinner plated steel for the walls. They don't have the same air plenum. They don't have the same water makeup. So they're often try to be copied, but they're never duplicated for efficiency. And ours are built to last, not built for obsolescence. So kind of a history, as I told you before, we're extremely very proud of our history. You know, the first prototype, 1963, the third generation, which we're still producing today, 1985. But you can see the original designs way back in the early 60s, late 50s that we're still utilizing today. Why is it important to condition your sand? And it's all about the hot sand. And we're talking about sand that's greater than a 49 degrees C. Why is it bad for the foundry? This is where I always, even when I was on the resin side of the business, everybody said, where do you want to start your tour? I don't want to start at the molding line. I want to start in the scrap area. Where are they experiencing scrap? And what's the worst scrap are they experiencing and what's causing it? I want to see, are they getting pinholes? Are they getting dirt inclusions? Is it a rough surface? Are they having scrap because of broken molds? But what is causing the scrap? And what are they saying is causing the scrap? Then you can talk about the sand system. Are they getting segregation in their silos? Are you seeing a lot of steam forming? Are they really not getting the green sand strength from because of poor bentonite performance? Are they getting poor compactability of the molds? Are the mold making poor? Are they also having poor core making too from other varieties because of the hot sand that's going into the core room? Ultimately, hot sand is going to increase the cost. And a lot of things is, again, greater than 49 degrees C. I think you all can raise your hand that a lot of your foundries will have that, specifically the ferrous foundries that have extremely hot sand. You know, I've seen sand as high as 200, I'd say 100 degrees Celsius going into molding machines, and their molds are steaming, and they're wondering why they're not getting great performance. And the key thing here is the bentonite or the clay performance starts breaking down greater than 49 degrees C. The most optimal bentonite performance is less than 49 C, or clay performance less than 49 C. The minute you start getting above that, that's when you start deteriorating the performance of bentonite, or the performance goes down and it's less than optimal. So that's the key when you're looking at 49 degrees C going into the molding machine. That's it, molding machine. As I mentioned before, if you were to purchase only one piece of SIMPSON equipment, it should be a multi-cooler. And I give the three people that I respect the most on the green sand side of things on recommending the SIMPSON multi-cooler. This is a 150B, MC 150. So the value of the SIMPSON multi-cooler, first and foremost, it's a continuous operation. I'm telling you right now, we're dealing with an installation in Japan. Tom, what do you recommend for operating? How much time do you want to operate, or run time?
Oh, like between, like I wouldn't want to start and stop it any more than twice in an hour. I mean, that would be like my max. I mean, they're designed to run. So having a surge hopper before the sand cooler,
it's a must.
It's a must. If you have 30 to 45 minutes worth of capacity in that surge hopper, that's ideal. And then the biggest thing too is it's a continuous feed, meaning you're sending the same amount of sand into the cooler at all times. What you don't want to do is have your sand bed feeding the cooler, have it varying, have a little bit of sand to a lot of sand, because essentially what you're going to do is that cooler door is just going to open all the way up and puke sand out, or it's going to close down and hold sand. You want a nice flow of sand going through it at all times. So surge hopper, you need to have a metering gate set on that belt that's feeding that cooler set. And then what you do is when that surge hopper would hit a minimum probe, you would shut the belt off, and essentially you take the cooler out of it has a clutch on it, so you basically, the motor continues to run, but you stop everything inside, because again, you are putting energy into the sand. So if you just sit there and run that cooler for an hour full of sand with the plows running, you're going to actually increase the temperature of your sand that's in there, and you're going to dry it out over time. So that's what we're trying to avoid.
But the key thing here is this isn't batch.
Right.
It's continuous.
Yep.
So the specific customer that we're dealing with, they only have 8 minutes of runtime, and we recommend a minimum 30 minutes of runtime.
Yeah.
You can't calibrate. You can't get decent readings. You're not taking the full advantage of what the multi-cooler is designed to do. It's designed to reduce outlet sand to less than 49 degrees C. Typically, it's 10 degrees C above ambient. It's what basically is the ultimate capabilities of it. The goal is 49 degrees C, but whatever your ambient temperature is, it's that plus 10 degrees, is what we're basically saying. Right, Tom? I got that right, didn't I?
Yep.
Back blend, sand to homogeneous. Basically what happens, you'll see the path. It's a figure 8 path where you're getting a constant back blending or mixing of the sand before it goes to, before it leaves the multi-cooler. Key thing here is a moisture level of a green sand system. You want basically between 1.5 to 2, plus or minus 0.2%. I was in a foundry yesterday. They're at 3.8. They loved it at 3.8%. Then they had a multi-cooler. Wasn't working the best, but they had a multi-cooler. It depends on it, but the goal is 1.5 to 2%. We can add bentonite to the multi-cooler. Was in a foundry the other month. They're adding 70% of their clay needs into the multi-cooler, and they don't add it into the muller. It allows them to control their bentonite costs even more. and overall significantly improved compactability and compressibility control. Now, I'm very mindful of our time. We are 10:02. I've got a couple more slides on the sand cooler just to introduce it. If you have time, you guys let me know, or we can stop and schedule up a little bit more in-depth multi-cooler preparation training session.
Yes, we can
What do you want to
continue.
do, Ernie?
We can continue. Is it
Okay.
How long it's going to be? 10, 15
I think it's
minutes?
just going to be a couple more minutes. That's it.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
okay.
okay.
So
Just
this is what
continue.
I wanted to show you, is that this is an actual output from one of our customers that before multi-cooler, without the multi-cooler, look at the variation that they're experiencing. Not only in compactability as it relates to conductivity as it relates to temperature. And then the minute that they added the multi-cooler, look at how much more controlled their overall process was. So this is the benefit of what a multi-cooler will do. It removes variability in the process. That's all we're trying to do, is how do we get more predictability, less variability into the foundry process. So unpredictable, uncontrolled temperature will equal uncontrolled water, which equals uncontrolled conductivity, which equals uncontrolled compactability, which equals scrap, which obviously is extremely expensive to the foundries.
And what these graphs don't show either is, improved bentonite efficiencies, because again, you're adding that water earlier in the process, into the sand, and then that sand goes and sits in your return sand storage bin. Now all of a sudden you have 2% water sitting with your clay during that tempering time, so you're improving the efficiency of your bentonite because that water is just hanging out with that clay. So you're going to see better strengths for the same amount of clay as a percentage because that water is getting to temper. So that's another key thing within a foundry layout, is having enough tempering time within the foundry where that sand gets time to just relax and hang out with that added water.
So typically where the multi-cooler sits within the process flow, you've got screen, magnetic separation, sand storage, then the reclaimer, then the sand cooler, then you transport it, sand storage, mixer, muller. But it flows a little bit right between the mixer and muller. There's your sand storage that Tom was talking about, having the water kind of hang out or temper with the sand and the clay. And then you've got the sand storage leading into the reclaimer, which reading, because of the sand reclamation or our proclaim, is also a continuous. Sometimes you have a sand storage between the reclaimer and then another sand storage between the reclaimer and the sand cooler. Here's that wonderful multi-cooler project worksheet. I can't stress enough. Please fill it out. We won't quote without it. That's my public service announcement for the day. These are the sizes. Remember, these are imperial. Okay. Now, we have an MC25, which is metric only, which I will tell you, very common in India, very common where there's very small foundries. These are tiny units. Okay. They don't take very large footprint at all. Other common sizes would be the MC50, the MC100. We're currently tech transferring the MC50 and the MC100 to India right now. Then these are larger foundries. So remember, imperial tonnage, so take 10% off. This is 90 tons an hour. This is 135 metric tons an hour. This is 180 metric tons per hour. There's actually one in between here, the MC250, high air. If you've got larger foundries, I unfortunately am not that familiar with your foundry market and the size of the sand systems, but these are some big boys right here. These are very large multi-coolers. And that's it. Why don't we stop here for the day?
That's great. Is there any question, Vincent? You
Oh,
raise your
Vincent's
hand.
got his hand up. I'm sorry.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Andy, for the explanation. Anyway, I would like to asking about the magnetic separator. Does Simpson have any
We do
equipment
not.
for it?
Nope, we do
Okay.
not get into the magnetic separators of the equipment side of that. We don't,
Okay.
unfortunately. Now, if I'm not mistaken, our counterparts in DISA China and also DISA India, they get into the sourcing and engineering of entire sand plants, sand reclamation plants, and what have you. So they might have access to it, but currently we do not source and we do not have a magnetic separator.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
No problem. Thank you, Andy.
Oh, you definitely.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Hi, Andy.
Well, hi, Widya. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for your presentation. First, I want to compliment about Simpson on having a great website. I think the detailed product information is quite inspiring, and the project worksheet is, I think, quite helpful for me, especially to understand the customer's needs and the backgrounds as the basic information for us to define the best product recommendation for the customers. But I want to ask a question. What kind of service and support does Simpson provide as mentioned in your company profile video? And has Simpson ever had a special collaboration with some company in Indonesia for calibration process? Because um, a few years before, I sell a few equipment to our customers, and their first question usually is, how about the calibration? Uh, or does Simpson handle the calibration on your own, or how? That's all my question. Thank you.
Widya, that's a great question, and I wish I had a perfect answer. In the past, how we've managed it is most of the service for our sand testing equipment, and we have two service teams. We have one service team that focuses on our sand testing equipment. It's a different skill set, and one service team that focuses on our OEM equipment. Okay. And being a family owned company for 110 years, all that service pretty much originated from the United States. We are in the process of expanding that. It's a reason why our product manager, Jeff Smith, for our sand testing equipment is in China this week. We had a service agent from DISA China come to the US for 2 weeks. He traveled and did some lab training. Now they're reinforcing the lab training where we'll have a more regional person to do minor repairs as well as some calibration services, at least in the Chinese area. I know it's not Southeast Asia. In the past, we have trained our agents, if they have a qualified individual, to do some of the calibration services. We had one in Turkey, one in China, quite frankly, before we were acquired by Norcan. But we're in the process of setting up regional training centers and service centers for our equipment. It just can't happen fast enough. So, how we've been managing it right now is if there is a regional person available in the short time and they have time available, we'll send them in. If not, we're scheduling basically because calibration people require once a year, 1 year visit where we'll visit the market and get as much calibration done as we possibly can in a week. And so typically that's what we're doing. It's not optimal right now, but that's how we've been managing it. Probably not the answer you wanted to
Okay,
hear, but
yeah.
yeah. But Lydia, if there is a company that you know of that provides third party services, I'd be willing to take a look at the at least forward the name, because we would have to certify them to make sure, because there's a lot of folks even in the U.S. that use third party calibration on our equipment and they're not certified for it. and they don't necessarily know the nuances or the differences in our equipment. But right now, everything, that's just a fact. Everything comes from the US. And I'm not going to overpromise and underdeliver. We're still building our service network.
Yeah, that's okay. I hope the expansion goes smoothly and we have a growing team for that calibration. I think for the third party in Indonesia, we will take a look about it because there's a standard. It's called KAM in Indonesia. But I also don't have much knowledge about that. We will take a look about that and we will inform you later about this. Thank
Great.
you.
It's going to be a lot of growing pains, you know, as you
Yeah.
guys grow, we're going to grow, and we'll work with it together. And we'll obviously, you know, we are willing to travel to support the customer base. We 100%, we need to do that. But it needs to be obviously scheduled and mindful. Major repairs, we ship the equipment either to the US or to Denmark for major repairs, but hopefully we're going to be in a position where we can do minor repairs. There's a lot of things we can do over the phone between our service agents and the customer
Hmm.
but for true calibration services that somebody
Yep,
wants
yep.
a certificate, you need to have somebody locally to do that, and we're working on that.
Yes. Okay.
Great
Thank you
question
for
though.
the
Thank you.
response. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much, Woody. I appreciate it. Any other questions?
Any question? Well,
Okay.
yeah.
Hello, hello.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, guys.
Hello.
Rian, you have question? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Actually, I'm very curious for Wellabrator because as I know, Wellabrator is including your company. So
Yeah.
then I think 5 years ago or more than that, I'm take your animation in YouTube. So
Yeah.
then I'm provide some education to our customer how to be good blasting because my experience in the blasting field. Actually, I'm curious to your company provide us some training
Yeah.
to reminding
Yeah.
our knowledge.
Yeah, Rian, for Wellabrator Park, it's separate. So I will arrange what is in the plan is in October. We will have somebody from German to come
Okay.
to Indonesia for training and we do some joint visit customer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that one we can talk separately. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else? I think that we will organize. I will organize again. After we go to visit customer, we got a little bit understand on the product, and then we know what question to ask. After I think sometime that we have more question. You know, when we go to the market, we see customer, and then after that we will do another second session training, maybe once every month or twice every month, based on you know, when we need training, everybody talk, then we can organize another one. Yeah.
I think that'd be great. And obviously, when questions come up, this great little contraption called the WhatsApp phone is working pretty good, and the communication. I appreciate that very much. And you know, as you can see, I don't sleep a lot either. You guys are up at all hours, so we're here to support and offer you guys anything we can across the miles. But again, it wasn't extremely technical today, but I wanted to familiarize yourselves with our website, how we like to do business, and then we'll get down in more of the technical as we expand these training sessions. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ernie, for setting it up.
Thank you, everybody. I record this training, so I think that I don't know how to share it. I will find it out. So something that we can look back or we can share with our colleague here in Indonesia, if you want to look at the video. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you,
for your
guys.
time.
Thanks.
Have a
Yeah.
great
Thank you so
day.
much.
Yeah,
Enjoy
take
your
care.
sleep.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.
Have a good day, Andy.
Yeah.
And all.
Good night.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Good
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day for you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Ernie.
Bye.
Goodbye.